Welcome to the Fatter Wallet Show, because stewardship isn't about being broke. On this show, we read the books, we break down the ideas, and we articulate the best thinking on money, investing, entrepreneurship, productivity, financial strategy, and, of course, wealth creation. Every episode is really designed to help you stop guessing, start growing, and build a life of freedom, purpose, and stewardship. And if you're tired of feeling stuck financially, you are in exactly the right place, because here at Fatter Wallets, we don't just talk about money, we teach you how to master it. Before we jump in, I want to invite you to grab the free courses we have available over at fatterwallets.com. They are completely free. Inside, you'll discover courses like how to pay off your mortgage in 3 to 7 years using the Velocity banking strategy. This method shows you, step by step, how to restructure your debt, use your cash flow as a weapon, and eliminate loans in record time. And you can do it without earning more money and without working extra hours. You can also learn how to turn the stocks you already own into weekly income using covered calls. You'll discover how to sort of rent out your shares, generate consistent premium income, and dramatically increase your ROI with our beginner-friendly options trading course. All of this is 100% free because we believe financial wisdom should empower people, not lock them behind a paywall. So if you're ready to think bigger, live wiser, and grow a fatter wallet God's way, you're in the right place. All right, let's get into today's discussion. We are looking at the book Freakonomics. So today we're opening up a realm of thinking that, honestly, it asks us to throw out almost everything we think we know about how the world works. We're diving into a powerful, objective way of looking at things that strips away emotion, it strips away bias, and it reveals the raw mechanics of human behavior, of risk, and crucially for anyone interested in strategic decisions, how we all respond to incentives when money and status are on the line.
Exactly. This exploration is fundamentally about applying a set of tools econometrics, really, which means using huge data sets and, powerful statistical analysis to measure things that are usually considered sociological or criminal or even just matters of morality.
So we're moving past speculation.
We're moving beyond speculation and into the hard data. We're talking about looking at the hidden side of everything.
And that phrase, the hidden side, that feels like where the real value is for anyone making strategic decisions. We're looking at the difference between morality and economics.
That is the core thesis right there. Morality is the aspirational world. It's how we wish people would act, if they were guided purely by ethics or doing the right thing.
How things should be.
Right. But this economic way of thinking, it's this unflinching look at how the world actually functions, grounded in the data of our choices and what we can measure. If you want to understand why housing prices move, or why employees cheat, or why people take huge risks for tiny returns, you really have to adopt this measured viewpoint.
And it seems like the key to understanding modern life, whether it's housing prices or why crime rates suddenly fall, is just knowing what to measure. And this is the important part, how to measure it correctly using these tools. This immediately makes me question the standard stories we accept every day.
And that leads us directly to the problem of conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is, the comfortable story, the widely accepted narrative we all tell ourselves.
The things we just assume are true.
Yeah, the truisms we rely on, maybe because they make emotional sense, just because we hear them repeated over and over by people in authority. But when you actually look at the data, you find that conventional wisdom is often profoundly wrong.
Okay, let's run through some classic examples where the data just blows up the conventional wisdom. For decades, the story among criminologists was that crime, especially violent crime, was this unstoppable force that was just going to keep rising through the 1990s.
Yet the complete opposite happened. It defied almost every single prediction. Another one, a truism you hear all the time in political circles, is this absolute belief that money buys elections, period.
More money, more votes.
Right. We'll show the data on that later, but the power that we attribute to campaign spending is, it's largely fictional when you test it.
And what about professional advice?
Yeah.
We assume when you hire an expert, like a real estate agent, that they are 100% on your side working to get you the most money.
But if we apply this economic lens, you find out pretty quickly that assumption can be a very dangerous and expensive one to make.
So why does bad conventional wisdom stick around?
Well, because the experts who create and repeat it, the political scientists, the criminologists, the real estate agents, they often have a vested interest in keeping that story alive. It serves their own self-interest or it maintains their status.
I see.
So they bend the facts, maybe not even on purpose sometimes, to support the existing narrative. This kind of analysis, it's the objective way to bypass that bias by just looking at the numbers and finding the patterns that tell a different story.
Okay, so let's unpack the foundational concept here. one that touches every part of our lives, especially how we manage money and risk. I'm talking about incentives. If we want to master our finances, we have to understand what makes people, including ourselves, tick.
Incentives are truly the cornerstone of modern life. They're described almost poetically as a bullet, a lever, a key, an often tiny thing with astonishing power to change a situation. They're just the system of rewards and punishments that guide our choices.
So if you do well at work, you get a bonus. If you speed, you get a fine.
Exactly. It's that simple. And they fall into three basic categories, which is where things get interesting because they can interact and sometimes collide in really unexpected ways.
Okay, what are the three types?
First, you have economic incentives. These are the most obvious ones. Financial rewards or penalties. Your salary, a tax, a commission, a fine. Second, social incentives. This is all about our deep desire to avoid public shame or, to gain acceptance and status. If the government puts a huge fine on littering, that's economic. But if the real thing stopping you is the fear of being shamed publicly, the social incentive is actually the more powerful force.
Right.
And third, moral incentives. This is your internal compass, the desire to do the right thing, driven by feelings of guilt or duty, or just altruism.
And this is where we get these fantastic stories about the unintended consequences of messing with these incentives. You have this perfect test case with an Israeli daycare center.
Oh, this case it's cited everywhere because it perfectly shows what happens when you swap one type of incentive for another. The scenario was simple. Parents were always late picking up their kids, which forced the teachers to stay late. The center was just relying on the parents' guilt, their moral duty.
The moral incentive.
Yes. So to solve this, the center introduced a $3 fine for parents who were more than 10 minutes late.
$3.
Yeah.
We just stress that's a trivial amount of money, right? It was what, a fraction of the monthly fee?
A tiny fraction.
A minor.
A minor economic penalty. The management thought this financial deterrent would stop parents from being late.
But that is not what happened.
Not at all. It was a spectacular failure. The number of late pickups more than doubled almost immediately, and it stayed high for the whole 12 weeks the fine was in place. It just defied all conventional logic.
Okay, I have to ask, why would parents suddenly start coming later when they were being charged for it?
Because the fine replaced their deep-seated guilt with a very low price. Before the fine, a late parent felt bad. They were burdened by a powerful moral incentive. They knew they were inconveniencing a teacher. But once the $3 fine came in, the whole thing was reframed. It wasn't an ethical problem anymore. It became a simple, cheap transaction. Parents could now just pay the fee and essentially buy off their guilt.
They bought the right to be late.
That's exactly it. It shifted the relationship from one of, communal courtesy to a commercial one. The low price made the moral compromise totally acceptable.
Wow.
And here's the really profound part for anyone designing a system. When the economists saw it was a total failure, they got rid of the fine. But the high rate of late pickups stayed. It didn't go back down.
The damage was done, the moral compass was broken by the money, and once you took the money away, the old moral norm just didn't come back.
They had been permanently taught that being late was a matter of cost, not a matter of conscience. The lesson is you have to be so careful when you design incentive systems. Sometimes putting a small price tag on a bad behavior doesn't stop it. It just legitimizes it and destroys the moral reason not to do it in the first place.
That's a stunning lesson in psychology. Okay, speaking of maximizing returns and minimizing costs, let's move on to cheating, which is really just an economic act of getting more for less and how data can expose it.
Cheating is everywhere. I mean, from the highest levels of corporate finance down to third graders. It happens when the reward for getting away with it outweighs the perceived risk of getting caught.
There's a really remarkable anecdote from 1987 that just perfectly shows how removing the incentive to cheat instantly revealed how big the problem was. Tell us about the 7 million vanishing children.
It's a spectacular example of just everyday financial fraud on a massive scale. So before 1987, the IRS didn't require you to provide a Social Security number for each dependent child you claimed on your taxes.
So you could just write in a dependent.
You could just write one in. The financial incentive was obvious. Claim an exemption for a child, whether they were real or not, and lower your taxes.
And then the IRS started requiring a verifiable Social Security number for every single dependent.
And overnight, 7 million phantom dependent children vanished from the tax system. About 1 in every 10 dependents claimed the year before. Gone.
7 million.
7 million exemptions disappeared just because the financial incentive to cheat was suddenly countered by a real risk of getting caught.
The sheer number is just staggering.
Oh.
Okay, let's apply this same kind of data detective work to a really high-stakes environment where careers were on the line. The Chicago public school system.
This is a devastating example of incentives gone wrong. Because of federal education rules, low reading scores on standardized tests could get teachers demoted or even fired.
So there was a massive economic incentive for the very people tasked with teaching ethics to cheat.
It became a survival mechanism for them.
So how did data analysts even begin to tackle this? We're talking about, what, 700,000 sets of test answers?
Yeah.
Millions and millions of individual answers?
They used a sophisticated algorithm. It was specifically designed to look for statistical fingerprints patterns that just don't match up with how students normally learn or make mistakes. The key was to find patterns that pointed away from student error and towards, deliberate manipulation.
What were the telltale signs? What flagged the classroom for cheating?
There were two big statistical red flags. First, the algorithm would flag a classroom if it found large blocks of identical answers, especially for the harder questions at the end of the test. A teacher who's changing answers is trying to be efficient, right? So they'll make sure the tough questions are correct to boost the score.
Okay, that makes sense.
The second, and this one is highly unusual, was what they called a discontinuity pattern. They'd find classrooms where, suddenly, half the students would get 8 or 10 consecutive hard questions right. But those same students had missed much easier questions earlier in the test.
That makes no pedagogical sense at all. Why would they get the hard ones right and the easy ones wrong?
Because the teacher, under pressure, is often frantically correcting answers. They're focusing their effort on the cluster of questions that will push the class score over that minimum passing threshold. They might miss the easier ones at the start, or just focus on the sections they know are weighted more heavily.
So the data didn't just suggest cheating. It was pointing to the exact classrooms where it was probably happening.
Exactly. The analysis found evidence of teacher cheating in over 200 classrooms per year. So the school system decided to retest the students in those suspected classrooms. They told the kids it was just for administration purposes, so the teachers wouldn't know they were being investigated.
And the retest confirmed everything.
With shocking clarity. In the classrooms the algorithm had flagged, student scores plummeted on the retest, sometimes by more than a full grade level. But in the control classrooms, the scores were stable. The evidence was overwhelming. It led to dozens of teachers being fired. It just shows the incredible power of this kind of analysis to uncover hidden truths when the economic stakes get high enough.
Let's move from the classroom to the national sport of Japan. Sumo, a sport that's supposedly built on honor, tradition, and integrity. Yet it seems the same economic incentives are at play here.
The economics of sumo are brutally efficient. Everything, and I mean everything, depends on a wrestler's ranking. That ranking determines their income, their status, their entire life.
And the financial stakes are enormous.
Right. An elite Sekatori wrestler can earn over $170,000 a year. They're celebrities. A low-ranked wrestler, on the other hand, makes about $15,000 and has to live a life of servitude, cooking, and cleaning for the top guys.
The difference between success and failure is the difference between wealth and poverty.
It really is. And that success is defined by a razor-thin margin in the tournament structure.
Tell me about that.
Each wrestler fights 15 bouts. The critical life-altering moment is the difference between an 8-7 winning record, which lets you keep or raise your rank, and a 7-8 losing record, which guarantees you get demoted.
So that one match is everything.
The data suggests that winning that 8th match is 4 times more economically valuable than winning any other single bout in the entire tournament.
When the stakes are that high, the incentive to fix a match yaocho, I think it's called, must be immense. How did the data expose this in a system that's so shielded by tradition?
The analysts were clever. They focused only on matches on the final day of the tournament. Specifically, when a wrestler with a 7-7 record, who is on the bubble and must win, is fighting a wrestler with an 8-6 record who is already safe.
So the 8-6 wrestler has nothing to lose, but the 7-7 wrestler is facing disaster.
Exactly. Now, based on their past performance against each other, the 7-7 wrestler should win that match just under half the time.
Statistically, what was the prediction?
The prediction was 48.7%, but when they analyzed thousands of these matches, the 7-7 wrestler actually won an astounding 79.6% of the time.
Wow. From under 50% to almost 80%.
It's a massive statistical anomaly. It's a nearly 4 out of 5 win rate that simply cannot be explained by chance or a sudden burst of skill.
That statistical jump just screams manipulation. So what's the theory? How does the fix work?
It points directly to a quid pro quo arrangement, a deal. The safe 8-6 wrestler agrees to intentionally lose the match to take a fall so the 7-7 wrestler can secure his rank and his income. The unspoken understanding is that the favor will be repaid down the line, maybe in the next tournament, when the stakes aren't so high.
And did the data confirm that this was just a temporary thing, happening only at that moment of maximum pressure?
Absolutely. When those same two wrestlers met in later tournaments, when neither of them was on that 7-7 bubble, the win percentage for the guy who was previously favored went right back to the expected 50-50 rate.
So the corruption was surgically targeted at the moment of highest economic leverage.
Precisely. The data, once again, tells a story of intense economic pressure just completely overriding moral and traditional rules.
It really forces you to question any system that's built on perceived honor. Okay, let's shift gears now to Section 3, where we look at information itself as the ultimate source of power and financial leverage.
Information is, it's the foundational currency of the modern age. And information asymmetry, that's just the condition where one party in a transaction knows way more than the other, is the engine that allows experts to generate massive profits.
And to exploit people who lack that knowledge.
Exactly.
We can start with a really fascinating historical example that shows how just releasing information can neutralize a whole organization that was built on fear, the Ku Klux Klan.
The Klan was so terrifying psychologically because its power came almost entirely from secrecy. The rituals, the secret hierarchy cavaliers, grand dragons, imperial wizards, all of it created this air of impenetrable menace because their operations and their language were hidden. Their advantage was that their targets had no information.
Then the journalist Stetson Kennedy decides to fight them not with force, but with information.
Yes. Kennedy spent years inside the Klan gathering every secret password, every ritual, all the details of their internal structure. And then he did something absolutely brilliant. He gave all of that confidential information to the producers of the hugely popular Superman radio show.
Turning the language of terror into the script for a kids' radio show. That must have been devastating for them.
It was strategically neutralizing. Can you imagine? Millions of kids listening as their hero, Superman, uses the Klan's own secret passwords to defeat the Grand Dragons. It instantly turned their secret language of hate into a national joke. The secrecy that fueled their terror was gone.
The information, once it was out there and mocked, just destroyed their advantage.
It led to a profound loss of membership and power.
That's a perfect lesson that leads us right into a modern financial example where this same information asymmetry costs people real money every single day.
Yeah.
The real estate agent. We hire them because they have what's called a gigantic informational advantage.
You're right. And we make the critical assumption that our incentives are aligned. We want the highest price, and we think they want the highest commission. But when you look closely at how they actually get paid, you see this massive misalignment.
Okay, let's break down the math on that commission again, just to see what the agent's actual reward is for working harder for us.
Sure, so on a $300,000 house sale, the typical 6% total commission is $18,000. But that gets split up. The individual agent who is selling your house typically only pockets about 1.5% of the total price.
So on a $300,000 sale, that's $4,500 for them.
Right. Now think about the effort it takes to push that sale price higher.
So if the agent puts in extra time, 2 more weeks of open houses and negotiations, and they manage to sell my house for an extra $10,000, what is their personal cut of that?
Their personal share of that extra $10,000 profit for you is a measly $150.
$150.
For an agent who's focused on maximizing their hourly rate, $150 is nothing. It's not worth the extra weeks of work. Their incentive immediately shifts to getting a quick sale, even if it's for a slightly lower price, so they can collect that $4,500 and move on to the next client.
And the data actually proves this happens. There was a study of nearly 100,000 house sales in Chicago that showed how agents treat their own houses compared to their clients' houses.
And the difference is stark. When agents sell their own homes, they keep them on the market an average of 10 days longer and sell them for an extra 3% more than equivalent houses owned by their clients.
3%. On a $300,000 house, that's $9,000 or $10,000.
It's about $9,000, yes. Money the agent collects for themselves. They're willing to put in that extra 10 days of patience and work only when they get the full economic reward for it.
They use their information advantage and patience for themselves, not for their clients, because the extra reward for them is basically negligible.
And you can even see this behavior in the subtle ways they use language in the property listings.
What are the key words that give away the agent's real intention?
The analysis of the ad language found that words that correlated with a higher final sales price were specific, expensive, physical things. Words like granite, state-of-the-art, Korean, maple, gourmet.
Things you can't argue with.
Exactly. They signal quality and justify a high price.
And the words that correlated with a lower price?
Those were the subjective, ambiguous adjectives. Fantastic, spacious, charming, or great neighborhood. These are often used to mask a lack of those high-value features. The agent knows the house won't get a top price, so they use suggestive language to get bids in quickly and close the deal fast.
The lesson for anyone managing their wealth is crucial. In any deal with an expert, your biggest financial risk comes from their incentives not being aligned with yours, and it's driven by that information gap.
This gap is everywhere. The internet has helped in some areas, like term life insurance, where comparison sites made prices fall dramatically. But it still exists anywhere there's vulnerability.
Like when we're emotional or desperate for a solution.
Think about a funeral director suggesting an expensive casket. They're relying on your emotional state and your reluctance to challenge their expertise. Or the financial advisor who churns your account with frequent trades that generate commissions for them but don't help your portfolio.
Even in medicine.
Yes. Medical experts might suggest expensive procedures, relying on a patient's fear and their unwillingness to question specialized knowledge. The critical point is that experts, from doctors to car mechanics, have the ability to exploit this imbalance, and if their pay structure benefits them more than you, they often will.
Okay, Section 4 takes us into the economics of the unseen. We're asking why we believe conventional wisdom even when the data tells us not to, starting with a powerful counter-narrative, the financial reality of being a street-level drug dealer.
Yeah, the conventional wisdom is that crack dealing is this highly profitable fast track to wealth. The reality, when you see the financial data, is the complete opposite. It's a brutal economic pyramid scheme that exploits the dreams of everyone at the bottom.
And this unique data came from the actual financial records kept by a gang, which a sociology grad student named Sudhir Venkatesh got his hands on after spending 6 years embedded with them.
The records spanned 4 years. They detailed every bit of income, every expense, every wage. And what they revealed was basically a corporate franchise model. There was a centralized leadership, a CEO and his board of directors controlling hundreds of street-level branches.
This structure pushed all the risk down to the bottom.
Right, while maximizing the supply of low-wage labor.
So what were the wages? For the gang leader versus the guys on the street?
The leader, the CEO, was making a net profit of about $8,500 a month, so about $100,000 a year, tax-free. The top 120 leaders in the organization were financially secure. They were living the life you see in movies.
But the foot soldiers, the thousands of guys who were on the corner facing the police, taking all the risk.
They were earning poverty wages, about $3.30 an hour. That's roughly $700 a month, well below minimum wage. The records even showed a lot of them held legit low-wage jobs at McDonald's or Walmart just to make ends meet.
So they're risking their lives for $3 an hour. Why would anyone take that deal? What was the risk-reward ratio?
It's insane. The cost of the job was astronomical. Over the 4 years of data, a foot soldier had a 1 in 4 chance of being killed.
1 in 4.
And a near certainty of being arrested multiple times. This is drastically more dangerous than being a timber cutter, which is one of the most dangerous legitimate jobs in the country. They stay in the trade because of the lottery effect, that slim hope that they can one day make it to the top of the pyramid. But the economics are just devastating for almost everyone involved.
This connects directly to the idea that we're constantly confusing correlation with causation, which is central to understanding both crime and finance.
We do it all the time. Correlation just means two things happen together. Causation means one thing causes the other. When we see a strong correlation, our brains instinctively jump to assuming causation, and that leads to a lot of wrong conclusions.
A classic example from the financial world is money and politics. Conventional wisdom says campaign spending buys elections.
The correlation is right there in front of you. Winning candidates almost always spend more money. But when analysts studied nearly 1,000 congressional races, they used tools to isolate the actual impact of spending versus, say, the candidate's personal appeal.
And what was the finding?
The surprise finding was that the amount of money a candidate spends hardly matters at all to the outcome.
How small is the effect?
It's tiny. If a winning candidate were forced to cut their spending in half, they'd only expect to lose about 1% of the vote. And if a weak losing candidate doubled their spending, they'd only expect to gain about 1% of the vote.
So the interpretation is completely backward. Money doesn't buy votes.
No. Money is a reflection of a candidate's appeal. Appealing candidates, the incumbents, the frontrunners, they raise money easily because donors want to back a winner. The money is a symptom of success, not the cause of it.
Finally, we come to the great crime drop of the 1990s. This was the mystery that confounded every expert who had predicted the exact opposite. They offered all these comforting theories: innovative policing, gun control, strong economy, but the data didn't really support them.
None of those immediate local theories could really account for the sheer scale or the timing of the drop, which happened pretty consistently all across the country. The theories felt good, but they missed a huge demographic factor that had been quietly at work for 2 decades.
And that hidden factor, according to the analysis we're looking at, was the legalization of abortion nationwide in 1973, following Roe versus Wade.
Now, the crime rate began its dramatic, sustained fall around 1993. That's exactly 20 years after the ruling. And the mechanism described here is purely demographic. It's not a moral or political judgment. It's about the data.
What does the data show?
Decades of sociological studies show that children born into really adverse family environments, to poor, young, unmarried mothers who might have sought illegal abortions before, are statistically far more likely to become criminals later in life.
So by providing legal access to abortion, the law led to a huge reduction in unwanted births among the very populations most likely to produce future criminals.
Right. And by shrinking that pool of individuals born into the most challenging circumstances, the demographic pressure that fuels crime was relieved 2 decades later, precisely when that generation would have entered their prime years for criminal activity.
And the impact of this was bigger than all the other factors combined.
The impact of this distant structural change was statistically determined to be far greater than the combined effects of all the gun control laws, new police strategies, and economic growth that experts usually point to. When you look at the timeline, the correlation between legalized abortion and the plunge in violent crime 20 years later was statistically undeniable.
It's the ultimate example of how the true cause of a massive shift can be something so far removed from the visible, surface-level explanations we prefer.
And the objective of this whole framework is just to provide a new lens for strategic thinking. We have to learn to rely on data, not moral positions or comfortable assumptions, to find answers to serious questions about crime, cheating, and corruption, and to inform our own financial decisions.
Let's try to consolidate the key principles we've explored today. If we're really aiming for financial and personal mastery, these feel like the fundamental concepts we need to keep in mind.
I'd say there are 4 primary strategic takeaways. First, you have to recognize that the world is overwhelmingly driven by incentives, economic, social, and moral, and those incentives are constantly producing unintended, often dramatic consequences. Always look at the incentive structure of any system.
Okay, number 1 is incentives.
Second, be deeply skeptical of conventional wisdom. It is so frequently wrong and often just serves the self-interest of experts. It has to be challenged with data.
Number 2, question conventional wisdom.
Third, acknowledge the power of information asymmetry. Experts hoard knowledge, real estate agents, stockbrokers, you name it, and they leverage that knowledge gap to their advantage. So be vigilant and try to align the incentives of anyone you hire with your own outcome.
Got it. And the last one.
And fourth, always look for the true cause, not just the correlation. The biggest truths are often distant, subtle, and hidden. It requires you to look past the easy explanations to find the real engine of change. We have to be willing to entertain those complex, non-obvious factors.
So what does this all mean for you? When we consider the difference in how a real estate agent markets their own home versus your home, or the incredible risk versus reward ratio for a street-level drug dealer, it really raises an important question for you personally. How many of the decisions you make every day are driven by the stated incentives, the things you can see, and how many are really being controlled by a hidden set of economic or social pressures that you haven't yet measured, calculated, or maybe even acknowledged? If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media accounts, and visit fatterwallets.com for more content, free courses, resources, and tools to help you live wisely and build wealth with purpose.